Okay, we're live. Hold on. Okay, Steve. So right before I hit record, I was telling you about my art pieces right behind me,
Yes.
and I'll give you an introduction in just a second. But you
Okay.
just said something, and I need to know what you just said. You said, "Ask me about my illegal border crossing from Ecuador to Colombia." So let's just jump in.
All right, let's
Sure.
do it. Yeah.
How did you sneak in? Usually people sneak out. That was what I did.
Well,
You were going the other
well,
way.
I spent the summer of 2014, my wife and I and our kids spent the summer in Ecuador, and we were in Quito, Ecuador, and we spent a lot of time traveling around Ecuador, but I really wanted to go to Colombia. I'd never been to Colombia before. So we looked it up, and you drive about 4 hours north and there's a border crossing from Ecuador into Colombia. But all the guidebooks say, it's the most dangerous crossing in the world. Don't go there, drug cartels, all this stuff. And we're like, well, that sounds like fun. Let's try it during the day. But when we got there at the border, it was just a mile long line to go through the whatever you do, the passport thing,
It's like a toll,
and
customs, yes, customs
yeah, and
port.
it was essentially a parking lot. So the taxi driver in Ecuador drove us to the border, dropped us off, and then the idea is you get in another taxi on the other side and go. But it was just a big open parking lot. There wasn't a fence. There wasn't like cordoned off lines. And after about standing in line for about 15, 20 minutes, I'm like, I wonder what would happen if we just like walked over there and got a taxi and just kind of skipped the passport line. And so we did. So it's my wife and I are kids, and they were smaller at the time. And so we get on the other side, get in a taxi. I'm like, well, that just saved us about 2 hours. And we get about 5 miles up the road. We're going to this little town called Ipiales, and we get pulled over by a cop. And I'm like, oh no. But all the police officer wanted to see was the taxi driver's papers. He didn't check our passports, nothing, and we were on our way. And that's how we got into Colombia without going through the passport
Yeah,
channels. So
Pialis I've heard is
yeah.
beautiful. I've never been myself, but I've heard really
It
good things.
it it is. It's this really cool. They've got this cathedral that's like 150 years old that was essentially built in a canyon. So it's like this canyon, if you can imagine like a miniature version of the Grand Canyon, but it's a canyon. And at the bottom, inside the canyon, is this cathedral. So you're like on these mountains, then you walk way down to get to the cathedral. And it's an amazing place if you ever get there.
I'm gonna have to get down there. I love.
Yeah.
Every
Yeah.
time I go back to Colombia, I'm like, this is so cool. I
Yeah.
love it. Okay, so hold on. Let me introduce you because we gotta let the people know who we have. So today, guys, we have Steve Roller on the show. Steve is a six summer bookman from 1986 to 1990, and then one rando year in 1993, which I'm sure we're gonna hear a little bit more about. Steve is the author of the Freelancer Manifesto, 11 Big Ideas to Stand Out and Thrive, and he runs a popular Facebook group called the Copywriter Cafe with over 11,000 members, and is the founder of the Cafe Backroom community. Originally from Wisconsin, he and his wife spent the last 3 years living in a 300-year-old house in Connecticut. Great territory. I sold in Connecticut.
Mm.
And now they're on to new adventures in Georgia, the state, not the country. Today, he helps solo practitioners navigate uncharted waters and finding a clear path forward in business and in life. I love talking to people who are doing this in the world right now because I always learn something. I feel like I'm going to have my notes out. Just it'll be a one-on-one session. So Steve, your favorite scroll number 2. I will greet this day with love in my heart. Originally of the Power Division and of course the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Welcome to the show. Welcome to the Ponytails podcast. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you, man. I've been looking forward to this for months. I first heard about this, I don't know, maybe a year ago. I watched some episodes. Then I knew a few people that came on and they're like, hey, it was fun. Andres is great. And so a couple months ago, I applied to be on, and thanks for having
Yeah.
me.
By the way, if you guys are listening and you don't know, like, because people always ask, how do you find people? Well, it's either like this where people find us and then they just,
Mm.
submit a form. If you want the form, guys, just message us on Instagram or be sure to just email us at theponytailspodcast.com, admin, or you can say guests, or also knock at the Ponytails podcast, any of those, and you can message us and inquire how to be on the show, we'll send you the link for that. We've never actually mentioned that ever in the air, I don't think. So
Oh,
it's the
good.
first time. Thanks for letting us. Thanks for
There you
reminding
go.
me.
All right. Yeah.
And right before we jump in, real quick word from some of our friends here on the show. We are brought to you today by Enlight Energy. I don't know if did you ever you sold in like the early '90s, so you might not ever have met Julio Hernandez, but he's a former DSP
No.
who sold late '90s, early 2000s, and he's now currently running Enlight Energy, which is a solar company, and they are crushing it. Especially if you guys are in Florida, Texas, or any of the sunny states, or if you guys are open to starting a new place and trying a new career in solar. These guys are doing it very, very well and are making pretty solid ground all over Florida. They're actually pretty well known now. It's
Hmm.
exciting to see a bookman kind of just take off. There's a lot of book people that work with them as well. So if you guys want more information on how to do that, reach out to us. They are much more fun to work with than whatever that crappy solar company is. Whatever. Insert name here. So on that note, all right, Steve, let me ask you, how did let's go back, wind the clocks, and kind of fill in some of the highlights since you left the book field and to
Yeah.
kind of how you ended up doing what you're doing now. Because this sounds really cool, copywriter stuff. You have a big old Facebook group, the Copywriter Cafe.
Yep.
And I'm going to learn a little bit how about you got into that point and also the freelancer manifesto. So tell me kind of like catch me up on like what's been happening
Yeah,
since.
yeah. I'll give you kind of the short version to start with. Yeah. So when I got out of selling books, well, I'll kind of come back to the 2-year gap story later.
Yeah.
But I had a first job out of school, and then I came back to sell books a couple of years later. But after that, then I went to work for in 1994. I went to work for Great American Opportunities, which was a sister company of Southwestern, and it kind of felt cool to stay in the family and be in the family um, and I did that into the early 2000s. That was a great company, great career, uh, fundraising consultant, working with schools,
Damn.
principals, teachers, things like this. It was a great job, a great sales job. I made good money. I liked it because the same atmosphere from Southwestern was still there, and the same kind of sense of camaraderie was there. Great management, great people, and I continued winning incentive trips, which I had gotten used to from selling books. So Great American had the same thing. My wife and I went to Puerto Rico, we went to Hawaii, and so had a lot of fun trips. But in the early 2000s, I started. Well, a couple things. I enjoyed sales. I was good at it. I could have continued, and I and I've been in sales in some way since then. But um, the structure and the schedule was a little bit too limiting for my tastes. So if you remember the dot-com bubble in the end of the 90s and then the early 2000s, everyone's like starting their own business and these things. I was reading Michael Gerber's The E-Myth book and the Clue Train Manifesto, if you ever read that book in the early 2000s. But everybody was talking about running their own business, doing their own thing, and this newfangled thing, the internet, that everybody's running online businesses. And I thought, I'm in this old school fundraising consultant business. I'm like, I don't know where this is going. I want to do something exciting. I want to do something online. But more than that, I wanted to. My kids were small at the time, and so I was newly married, small kids. By 2003, we had 4 kids, age 6, 7, and under. So
Oh my gosh.
I wanted to, and it was fun, but I was 2 things. One, personally, I wanted to travel more, and I knew with my sales schedule and the structure of corporate sales and national sales meetings once a year and quarterly meetings and all this stuff, and just you have to hit your quotas and do it on their terms. That I was never going to have large blocks of time to take vacations. And I'll come back to this later, but I had spent 3 months in Europe when I was younger, just traveling all over. And I'm like, that kind of spoiled me for life. Like, I'm like, I could never
Yeah.
again do a job where I once in a while might not have a 3 block chunk of time to do what I wanted to do. So I wanted to travel, but I also wanted to kind of see my kids grow up a little bit too, because they were getting into school and getting into activities. And I was finding with my sales schedule, so often I was missing games and practices and plays and just different things that they were involved in. So I wanted something flexible, and I wanted to work for myself. I've got this fierce, probably fostered, cultivated by the bookfield, but I've got this fierce independent streak of doing my own thing. And I knew I could sell. And so I started investigating other things that I could do from home. So way long before the last 5 years, when everybody started working from home, I was looking into this in the early 2000s and trying to figure out what I could do. Well, I discovered this idea of copywriting online, and I took some courses, went to some conferences, studied under some mentors, and really learned the craft of copywriting. For those who don't know, it's essentially selling in print. So as a writer, we write things like emails and landing pages and promotions for companies, and anything you see out there in the creative world, billboards in New York, Times Square, whatever, that was all done by a copywriter. Well, this idea intrigued me because I'm like, well, I know sales, I understand people, I understand persuasion. And I didn't know until then that I had a knack for writing too. It turned out I'm pretty good at it. Um,
Nice.
but more than anything, it was something that I could do from home. It was flexible. I could do it in Ecuador, where I ended up spending a lot of time over the next 5, 10 years. We could take trips to Nigeria to see my wife's family, and all these things that I could not do while I had a traditional sales job. So I transitioned into this world of copywriting. I've been doing it full time for 15 years now,
Wow.
and it's been a good ride. And along with that, then from being a copywriter for small businesses, I started coaching other writers, not so much on the craft of writing, but on how to sell themselves and how to get clients. Because it's one thing to learn the art of writing or copywriting, but it's a whole other thing to figure out how to get clients and sell yourself and your ideas. And obviously,
Yeah.
we have that foundation, and I didn't always, I guess I just kind of took it for granted along the way that everybody had those skills, and they don't. So I'm working with people anywhere from now, writers, freelancers, anywhere from 19, 20 years old. I've got a couple of young guys that I'm working with, and I've got people that are in their 70s and everything in between, mostly people in middle age, mid-career, changing careers. But I'm not teaching them how to write. I'm teaching them, hey, how do you build a business? How do you position yourself? How do you have a good client conversation? How do you sell yourself? How do you sell your
Yeah.
ideas? And now more than ever, with AI out there taking over a lot of writers'
Yeah.
positions, I've been making this shift the last few years to advising. So I consider myself not even so much of a writer anymore, but more of a business advisor. So I'm helping small businesses and individuals with just figuring out how to, as you put it in the introduction, how to kind of navigate uncharted waters and find a clear path forward. So
Yeah.
it's a form of coaching, but it's business coaching. It's helping people figure out how to find their place in the world and how to stand out in a very, very noisy, crowded world where it's getting harder to stand out because everybody's got access to the internet and everybody has access to a platform and, you know,
Yeah.
website, podcast, YouTube channel, everything. So you have
That's
to do
wild.
something. Yeah. So anyway, so that's where I am today. And I've got a community. I'm really big on the idea of kind of building communities. So I've built a large Facebook group of 11,000 some people, and it's very active, engaged. We were one of the first
That's sweet.
copywriting groups on Facebook. And then out of that, about 8 years ago, I started a private paid community where people could get higher level coaching, private coaching, one-on-one coaching, and smaller group stuff. And we come together once a week on a Zoom call. We interact online. I host live retreats where we get together twice a year in different places. I've got one coming up in Savannah next month.
Hmm.
So it's I'm trying to replicate, and as much as I love what I'm doing, and I have never been able to quite replicate the camaraderie that I felt when I sold books.
It's hard.
It
Yeah.
is. It
Yeah,
is.
okay. So I have so many questions, man.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll pause here for a second. Let you.
Yeah. Okay. Hold on. So let me ask you a couple. Well, first of all, that's awesome. Uh,
Thanks.
learn it to me if like I'm 5 years old. So when you're talking about copywriting is in everything and in marketing and every like
Mm.
what would to make sure I don't even for my sake, I'm sure I'm not the only one wondering this as I'm listening.
Yeah.
Um, what is it this the in essence, what do you mean when you say like everything that you see in marketing in Times Square, that's copywriting? How is it different than like writing uh or the varieties of writing that you see out there? Like what how did you specifically find this like side of writing that you had so much passion for and why this kind of like what
Yeah,
about it
yeah,
attracted you?
yeah, good question. And so a couple examples. So if you took a print magazine, like one of my favorite magazines is Rob Report. It's this luxury magazine. It's a print magazine, but it's this luxury magazine that has things like Rolls-Royce ads and Rolex ads and
That's so
things like
cool.
this. So even like in there, the one page ads that somebody puts in there, or you take the print. I'm going talking old school now, traditional stuff, but print magazine, print version of the New York Times on Sunday. You got a full page ad on the New York Times on Sunday, and some of these ads are really good, and people are spending gobs of money. The companies are spending gobs of money to put that ad in there. Well, they want it to convert. They want it to be persuasive. It can't just be an image ad like a 60-second spot in the Super Bowl, whereas the Doritos people do some funny ad and it's like, oh, that's cool. And they've got billions of dollars to spend on an ad. Well, this is more what I guess I would call direct response marketing, where you're directly kind of talking to a consumer and trying to get them to act based on what they see like right now. It's not just to get it in their mind and get them to think about it later. It's copywriting, and direct response copywriting specifically is designed to elicit an action. So there's a call to action. So in bookman parlance, I guess
It's
you would say
close.
it's closing the sale. It's the closing steps. It's the process. You don't just you don't just establish rapport, do your introduction, do your demo, and then say, well, you know, think about it and get back to me when you want. You've got specific closing steps. So in this process of writing, whether it's a print ad in the New York Times or an email sequence that somebody's doing, or somebody's launching something on the internet, some new course or something, or whatever it might be, they've got to get the audience's attention. They've got to grab them. They've got to keep them reading, and they've got to get them to take action. It's like even anything that you've bought a Facebook ad from a Facebook ad. I've spent a fair amount of money buying things from Facebook ads, and different ads online. Well, something about that ad caught my eye, and then you go to a landing page, and it's like, oh, that sounds interesting. Like I just got into this thing called the X3 bar. It's this exercise bar. I would have never found out about it if I hadn't seen the Facebook ad, and it was really good. And this guy's like a fantastic marketer, and whoever he's got writing for him does a fantastic job. And it like sold me on this thing, and it's not cheap, but I'm like, but that's I'm kind of going all over the place, but that's so yeah, copywriters write
That's
to persuade people to do things. So it's what we
so
in the business we call it selling in print.
I love that. Okay, that's good because there's also like copywriting for like books and stuff like that's different
Yeah,
than
so two kind of separate things, and
yeah.
because it's the same sounding word, it's people get them mixed up. Copywriting, WRITING, versus copywriting, which is like
RH, yeah.
getting the copyright, intellectual property. Hey,
Yeah,
don't steal my stuff. That's having a copyright on your intellectual
yeah.
property. Two separate things, but um, yeah, so copywriting is really not a term that people outside of the industry use. So I just typically say marketing messages. I write
So
marketing messages.
okay, so tangential question, and then and then I have to ask you about AI because you dropped that on me. I'm like, I know I've been thinking about this, how crazy AI can get, and the writer strike is in tangent to that as well because it's kind of the same
Mm,
idea of like how do we prevent AI from taking over people's jobs when they're
right,
that's kind of
right.
anyway. Okay, but hold on. In your opinion, in your opinion, in the last 10 years, what are your favorite copyright or sales marketing tool or, that you've seen that you're like, wow, that was really like you mentioned the X-Bar guy, the right?
Yeah, yeah.
But are there any maybe familiar? It could be really popular, right? Or it could be something more where like you saw and you're like, that is a great ad or that is a great marketing campaign. that you were like,
Yeah.
wow, hats off,
Yeah.
15
Well,
years in the business?
yeah. Well, one that I really like is there's a company called International Living, and they're all over online. They spend lots of money on ads online. But International Living, they also have a print publication, but most of their stuff is online. But they focus on helping retirees find a cheaper place to live than the United States. And so they talk about,
Oh,
hey, hey, you could live in Ecuador for less than you could live in the United States, that kind of thing. So their target audience is people who are close to retirement or already retired, who want to stretch their dollars, who want to get out of the United States, make their money go further, that kind of thing. Well, anyways, they have a classic in the business. They have a classic letter, that a promotion that they've used online over and over for probably 15 years now, maybe longer, that just paints a picture of what life could be in this more idyllic spot that is not the United States, being run over with all the problems that we have, no matter who's in
yeah,
charge,
yeah.
um,
Just look
and the
outside.
yeah, yeah. So anyway, so I discovered, so this International Living is a classic example of like, wow, that is their opening promotion, how they paint the picture, how they draw you in, how they get you thinking, wow, your life could be better if, just kind of think outside the box here, think outside the walls of our country. I used to joke, an aside here, I used to joke that that border wall wasn't to keep other people out, it was to keep us in.
Yeah, especially with the way airlines are failing every day.
Anyway, so yeah, but there's a lot of lots of examples. But yeah, that's so
Yeah,
I got enamored with Andres. I got enamored with this idea of copywriting. I'm like, wow,
so cool.
like, and I early on, um I got involved with some companies and wrote some cool campaigns. One of the first big companies that I did some work with was a company called Proactive, which you probably don't know, but it's for teenagers. It's like acne
So
medication.
their skin medication. Yeah, yeah.
Yes, skin stuff. So big company. And I did some work with them and helped them figure out like how they could reposition what they were doing and not just talk to the teenagers, because they're not the ones that are always buying it, but their moms are and their dads are. Actually, we found out that 95% of the time it was the moms buying it for their kids, not the dads.
Very
And
interesting.
all this stuff. So we started
Wow.
repositioning like all their messaging and all their marketing. This was about around 2010, early in my career. Um, but because of that, they are still a major player. Not, well, not because of me,
Sure.
but it helped them it kind of helped them shift their marketing and find new audiences and new places to put their marketing messages, and starting to do more stuff on Facebook, and they started doing stuff in malls and all this stuff that they weren't doing before. And it was kind of fun. But anyways, I got enamored with this whole idea. I'm like, well, one,
That's cool.
I kind of like marketing and selling, and I and I found out that I was pretty good at it. Now it took a number of years of really training and getting better at it, practicing on some clients, um but it pays well when you're good at it, and you're good at this art of, just as when you're good at the art of selling, you can make a very good living. Well, when you're good at the art of copywriting, which is essentially selling in print, and having that sales background was phenomenal. A lot of people don't coming into it. Marrying those two things, my sales background, a knack for writing, and just understanding people more than anything and why they do the things they do. And that's the part I find fascinating, not the actual writing, but I find it fascinating just trying to figure out like what makes people tick. Like, why do they
Yeah.
do the things they do?
Well, because it's a very specific kind of, you have to be, it's like a sign of cleverness, right? Because you have to have, I don't even know. Like for example, and this is not the same thing, but there's like certain slogans or certain campaigns, whether you see them on TV or in writing, like
Yeah.
on the billboard, that you're like, wow, that's so smart. Like I don't, that product isn't even for me, but I want to just buy it because that was such a interesting and well placed, thought, idea,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
phrase, right? The one that struck me the most recently was uh, the best or nothing is what Mercedes is going with their current like campaign. But I just
Okay.
like they just put like when we create something, blah blah blah, the best or nothing. And in my head, I'm like, it's like you could just put that on a billboard and it looks cool. Like it just
Yeah.
or like just put a nice looking
Yeah.
Benz, the best or nothing, and you're like,
Yeah.
wow, that's just or whatever. So
Yeah.
like to you, what are some of the components of a good ad? Like if let's say we're going to do a billboard and you're coaching me, I say, hey, look, I want to do something for this podcast, or I
Mm.
want to do something for this, Lacroix. I don't necessarily.
Mhm.
I'm not specifically asking for exactly what you would say, but
Yeah,
for you
yeah.
to be like, for there to be, I could tell you for a podcast what are some of the things both technical and not
Right.
tangible that you need to be able to have a good podcast. I hope.
Right. Right.
But
Yeah.
in your mind, with your experience, when you're trying to put together something like that, what are the components, right? What are the 30 demos, or what are the
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know rapport
Oh,
building activities?
yeah, a lot of it in our business is, and you've got kind of two sides of things. You've got the very creative ads that are like what you're talking about, Mercedes, the Super Bowl ads, the tough stuff
Right.
on billboards in Times Square, Madison, what we call Madison Avenue creative agency, big agency stuff. And then you've got stuff that we see all the time, like some guy that puts up a Facebook ad or whatever, that's not Mercedes Benz or big company. But the process is similar, very similar for all of it. A lot of it in our business is really just doing some deep thinking. It's doing some research, first of all, to find out, okay, what else is out there? What's the history of what they've been doing? What are the trends? Like
So
where
pre-approach.
yeah, kind of pre-approach kind of stuff. Yeah, yeah. There's actually there's it's funny. There are a lot of similarities and a lot of comparisons. But yeah, you're kind of digging into, okay, well, what have they done? What's been working in the past? What's shifting? Like what's shifting? And this is where you have to be kind of knowledgeable about the culture as a whole and be well read, even outside your focused niche. um, you have to kind of know like what's the zeitgeist, what's going on in the world today, what are people thinking, what's the trends, like what's changing people's behavior, why are they buying different, why is Starbucks 50% of their business now drive through and 25% mobile and only 25% walk in, which is like flipped
Mm,
from what it was 10 years ago. Why are these things all happening, and why are people disgruntled, why are people frustrated, what are they hoping for? So you're really kind of digging into like psychographics, like why do people do you so you're researching hard stuff like trends and economic indicators and financial stuff and competitors, but you're also thinking a lot about, very deeply about, like why are people doing this. So I tell people I spend a lot of time just observe. A lot of my job is like just observing people, either online or sometimes in person, like hanging
mm.
out at a coffee shop and watching people, like, and eavesdropping
Just
on
psychology.
conversations.
Yeah.
It really is psychology. It's really trying to figure out like why are people doing this, is the essence of it, I think. Why do people do the things they do, and how can we tap into that to get them to buy our stuff? I mean, that's
Yeah.
it sounds like pure capitalism. Like how do we get people to buy our stuff? But it
But it
really
is. I mean, it has to be a little in a lot of
it
by
is.
nature. It has to be because people
Yeah.
got to buy stuff. It's
Yeah.
gotta be.
And
And they're
I
gonna
and
spend that money somewhere.
kind of like in selling, years ago on some old cassette tape from Zig Ziglar many years ago, he said, about salespeople, he said, we're the engines that drive the economy. If it wasn't for us, things wouldn't happen. Nothing happens till you make a sale. The answer is on the next door, all this stuff, but it's true. And salespeople keep the wheels of industry turning. Well, in a sense, copywriters and marketers do the same thing and do that online now. So
Um,
I feel like I'm in my own little corner of the world. I'm not going to single-handedly like change the economy, but in my own little corner of the world, I'm doing my part to keep the economy humming along as
yeah.
best I can,
No, and that makes sense. No, no, no. You tapped on something earlier, and I wanted to revisit this. So earlier, you were saying because you're coaching people, not specifically on the copywriting, but on the how to sell themselves, which is an interesting dichotomy, I guess, to like or juxtaposition of a person who's good at copywriting, who's got the product itself down, but then can't figure out how to apply that to themselves so that their business is like the product is solid. But you're teaching people outside of the product. Here's how you run a business. Here's how you become more
Yeah.
marketable. But it's interesting that they wouldn't like naturally know how to do that. So can you talk a little bit about like why do you think that is, and how it ends up that
Yeah.
that can happen?
Yeah, I know, Andres. That sounds strange, doesn't it? It's like that's your business. Your business is selling stuff. How come you can't sell yourself? Well, the problem is that a lot of people that one, they don't have a direct sales background. And to me, the very best training for this, for what I do now was, and I'm not just saying this because it happened and I'm talking to your audience here, but the very best training for what I do now is the fact that I sold books door to door for 6 summers. And I learned how to communicate. I learned how to sell myself. I learned how to sell my ideas. More than I learned how to sell books, I learned how to sell myself. And people just, it's just weird. I mean, you can take a course, you can hire someone, you can go to a mastermind, you can go to a conference, learn all these things about writing and writing, how to write persuasively, but it's another separate learned skill to figure out how to sell yourself. And some people feel more comfortable. And this business attracts a lot of, versus selling, this business attracts a lot of introverts who think that, oh, all I got to do is sit behind my screen, tap away on my keyboard, come up with some magical words and phrases and cool stuff. And I don't have to interact with anybody. And I don't have to,
Mm,
well, that's a mistake. As people find out once they get in, it's like, well, the stuff's not just going to land in your lap. You have to make things happen. If you don't get out there and sell somehow, either inbound or outbound marketing, whatever, even if it's inbound stuff, somebody lands on your website somehow, they find you, or you come up in the search engines and they find you. Well, guess what? You got to have a conversation with them. No one's going to drop a few $1,000s because you got a cool website. You still have to have a conversation. So these are
mm,
separate skills. And there's a lot more people teaching the skill of writing and selling. This is the problem, selling the dream of, oh, you can make a lot of money doing this, than there are people like me selling the idea that, okay, that's fine. But now you got to figure out how to sell, and you got to sell yourself, and you got to have good clients. So the two don't go hand in hand. And also, I guess just people, I hope this is kind of answering your question, but
no, yeah,
also people are too close to their own deal to see what they need to do. And this is true of all of us, whatever we're doing, which is why therapists exist and why all kinds of
coaches.
coaches exist, because somebody could look at me and say, well, I mean, I'm just in my own world. I'm in my own bubble. I'm doing my own thing. I think I'm doing well. I know I could be doing better, but if I were to hire a top-notch business coach myself, and I have in the past, they would say, Steve, why are you doing this? Or what about this? Have you ever thought about doing this? I'll be like, no, I actually haven't. What do you mean? And so this is what I do for people. I see things that they don't see in themselves. Part of it's encouragement and just encouraging people. Look, I see something in you that you don't see in yourself. And I think you've got a skill, and I think you've got talent and drive. And if you were to just do these one or two small things, I think that would make a world of difference. So it's some of it's encouraging, just kind of, you know, being inspiring and encouraging, but some of it is just seeing things that they're too close to see themselves. And they just kind of got to get out of their own way. And maybe it takes somebody else like me from the outside, an outside objective observer, saying, hey, I'm seeing the whole picture. I'm seeing where you are. I'm seeing what your peers are doing. I'm seeing where things are going. I think this is what you need to do. And a lot of times what I do is I kind of tell people what not to be doing and to stop doing this. Like
Yes,
they,
avoid mistakes or simple.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
It's like, stop. Don't do that. I know that worked for people a few years ago, but don't do that anymore. That's not working. And so it's helping people just, and sometimes it's helping people. And these are hard conversations to have, but, um, and I'll come back to this maybe later, but some of these skills, what I'm talking about here, Andres, they come from the book field, but they came not from knocking on doors 80 hours a week. They came from the skills that I developed as a student manager and as an organizational leader, having personal conferences with people one-on-one on
Yeah.
Sundays, you
Yeah.
know?
And it's funny because even still to this day, I don't know how it was when you were selling, but to this day, like sometimes these are lessons that even Southwestern needs to learn. You know what I'm saying? Things where it's like, hey, how do you move with the times? How is it 2023 and your flagship product is still books? You know,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah, yeah,
like just maybe move faster. Um,
yeah, yeah,
Not to be critical, I'm just saying, like, when you say it applies to everybody, from the top down, it
right.
applies to everybody,
Oh,
and
totally,
it's
totally. Yep.
hard. It's hard, right? It's hard to. The reason we need that is because it's hard to relinquish an idea. Um, w- when Facebook started, it was supposed to be just like a kind of like a yearbook thing where students
Mm,
at Harvard could use to identify each other. And Mark Zuckerberg really wanted to see if like people were in relationships or not. Like that was like the
yeah,
according to the movie, right?
yeah, yeah,
But
I've seen
like,
it.
but now it's a marketing machine, right? It's really what it is. So
Mm,
sometimes
mm,
you start chipping away at this marble, and you start seeing a hand, and you think you're carving out an arm, but it's in a full. You don't see the full picture of a human, right? You don't see the whole
yeah,
David. You just thought it was a nice foot. Like, hey,
yeah, yeah,
it's
that's a great analogy, yeah,
more to it than just what you're seeing. And sometimes it takes someone else to be like, hey, you don't see this, but from out here, you could have all this, and it's
yeah,
hard. It's hard to let go of that hand or of that initial chisel because you found success in something, and just because it's been working, you feel like you
yeah,
don't need to, and then it's like, hey, you do. So I appreciate that insight. That's really really good. That's really good
yeah, yeah, thank you.
advice all around, not just in the copyright world, but in
Yeah,
general.
and along those lines too, just one last thing on that note is just I think people and I have had this problem ever since Southwestern because what were we drilled into us every year at in sales training every year, on the book field, don't quit, don't quit, don't quit.
Yeah.
And so I have sometimes in my life, and I think this is true of people that really want to make something work. I have at times in my life hung on to things that I was doing for too long because there's this little voice in my head saying, don't quit, don't quit.
Yeah.
And so, but sometimes, it's just we got to recognize, hey, is this the best use of my time and skills, and is this really what I'm good at? And there's been times where I've just had to come to the acceptance that, what, maybe that isn't my thing. Yeah, I'd like to be like Joe over here and have his job and do his thing, but I'm not really that guy. That's not me. That would not be a good fit. And I've either turned things down or sometimes got into things and then quickly left because it's like, oh, okay, yeah, that isn't me. As much as I want the lifestyle or the whatever the prestige of that position and what that job would bring, I don't think it's a good fit, and I don't think I would be happy. So we have
Mm,
to so that's another role that I play sometimes in
that's
helping
good.
people is helping people figure out, like, really almost like, I don't know if there's even positions like this, but almost like a career advisor, or if you had actually like good guidance counselors back in high school, most of them weren't, but but somebody that could guide somebody like, hey, I see this in you, or I think you should do this, or even just, even my sales manager, JT Olson, did this for me when I was in college. Aside from the book selling stuff, he's like, Steve, are you really going to be happy like pursuing this path of engineering? That just doesn't seem right for you. And he's like, why don't you take an acting class or take a public speaking class and keep going with the sales? I think you'd be good at it. And I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
okay. So it takes
You know,
sometimes other people telling us these things.
yeah. You know how I learned that lesson? I actually learned it through this podcast because um Hmm. Now I'm being super reflective, so I
Mm.
apologize.
No, that's fine.
No,
That's fine.
it's like I think I've mentioned this on the show before, but I I always was confused when um I'd be working for other companies, and people's mentality was like, "Oh, we can solve that. That's not a problem. That's a challenge. Like we can like the." And in my head, I'm like, "No, that's a problem. This is a problem. To you, it's a challenge, but this is a problem."
Mm.
And I
Yeah.
never understood how they could just see it as a challenge. Like I'm like, you're
Mm.
not. Right. But then I started doing the podcast, and as we were growing and facing challenges, not once has anything that we've done here like as far as like the production and bringing up, has it seemed like a problem? It has seemed like a challenge.
Hmm.
And I got that. I'm like, oh, you know what it is you have stumbled, at least until it starts that way. If it ever at some point doing the show starts bringing problems, like for you, it
Hmm.
was like the problem was being at your kid's play when you were at Great
Right.
American, right? That
Right.
that was a
Yeah.
problem. It wasn't a
Yeah.
challenge, right?
Right.
You had to be at this thing that you means that you missed the game or you missed the
Yep.
play or you missed the
Yep.
recital, which is a problem for your
Yeah.
parenting, right? So
Yeah.
that's it. I'm not saying things don't change or that it won't change on the podcast. I'm just saying like so far, everything that was a challenge has been precisely that. But the minute it starts becoming problems, I have to be aware and recognize, hold on a sec. These used to be a lot easier, or it was a
Yeah.
lot easier to deal with. And maybe
Yeah.
this is a sign. It doesn't mean it is, but finally, but maybe it's the first red flag of like,
Mm.
maybe this isn't what I'm supposed to be doing anymore. And so
Yeah.
far, nothing.
Yeah.
But to me,
Yeah.
that's how it seems to be for people who like are doing the right thing. Is it's never a problem. It's always a challenge, and
Yeah,
that's what it should feel.
that's a really good way to put it. And yeah, I have a feeling we both might get a little reflective here on this call. And as I was telling you before we started too, this, just getting ready for this mentally and thinking about these stories from the book field, I'm like, I hadn't thought about this stuff in so many years, but all of a sudden it just started flooding back. But there's so many lessons, and I take it for granted some days, and often for many years of my life, that and I forget like how much of where I am right now stems from the decision when I was 19 years old, finishing my freshman year of college, to sell books door to door in another part of the country. It was crazy. And I was not very good at it my first summer. I got pretty good at it, but I wasn't. But I did it. And it was just it set my life on a course of adventure and a trajectory that I would not have had. And I would not have the things I have in life if I hadn't. I mean, I'm just forever grateful for it. So yeah, I might get a little deep here on and
Good.
overly sentimental too, because um yeah, I'm forever grateful. I wouldn't well, I'll tell you the story later, but yeah, I mean, my wife was a bookwoman. We met on the book field.
Oh,
So
really? Okay, I was gonna
yeah,
ask you.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
that's awesome.
But yeah, we could no, I'll pause here for a second, but I want to kind of let you steer
Yeah,
this. Where do you
yeah.
want to go?
Yeah, okay. I had a couple more questions about the copywriting stuff, but thanks for sharing that because I often think about that too. I was on this trip in Europe, and that came up a lot of the times. And I actually felt really grateful that Jacob and my wife both were like, "If you hadn't started this podcast, we wouldn't be here." I'm like, if I hadn't said yes to sell books, but then you can always keep going back. Okay, then
Yeah, yeah,
Steve recruited
yeah.
me, so if Steve hadn't got, but at
Yeah,
some point along the lines, the baton was passed to you, and it was your choice to go do the thing, and you chose to do it. So that,
yeah,
as much as that is on you, so is the rest of what happened. And
yeah,
that's cool to think
yep,
about for sure. We'll get
mm,
into how you got recruited. I do want to hear about the story. But before we do that, I want to hear a little bit. I had a couple more questions about copywriting, and I wanted to
sure,
talk about
sure.
AI and copywriting. So we've been hearing about the strike as far as the writer strike for television, and if
Yep.
people haven't heard, it's because AI started kind of proving that it can be far quicker at being creative, if that's even possible. I don't even know if
Mhm,
maybe that's the right way
mhm.
to say it. But the point is that it can be used as a tool, which then could take away potential jobs for people who are in the creative space, and that
Mm.
includes very much copywriting that you do. So is there like a parallel from that, or a fear of that, of how can that be
Y
a weapon for good, but then also for not so good in your industry?
Yeah, and I think very much there's similarities, but it's quite a bit different than like the actor-writer strike. So the
Sure.
SAG-AFTRA strike, that I'm totally on the side of the actors and the writers, and they deserve what they get, and they deserve to be paid well. I do not like at all that studios are going to be moving toward AI generated scripts. And
Yeah.
oh my gosh, it just and the same thing with authors too, fiction books.
Yeah.
And I know I have a number of friends who are authors and write fiction and novel series and things like this. And to think that AI could potentially like displace and wipe out all the all the authors. Now, here's the thing. I don't think that AI is at the point yet where it's going to be pumping out, Ernest Hemingway or James Joyce
By
or
the time
somebody.
this publishes, though,
Yeah, yeah,
by
yeah.
the time the episode comes out, we're
In a
recording this today, but
in a couple weeks it will be, yeah. But it is pretty amazing what it can do. And so, yeah, there's this serious. Now, I don't know about the whole acting and CGI
right,
images and all that stuff. I'm not in that world, so I won't speak to that. But in our world,
yeah,
I will tell you that it has turned our industry upside down in about the last 10, 12 months.
that's wild.
So this entire year, so starting in January, a lot of the people who are in my paid community started telling me quietly, because everybody wants to make it seem like, oh no, I'm doing well. Yeah. Everybody wants to put up appearances. But quietly behind the scenes, people started telling me, yeah, I just got laid off from my agency job, or I had this in-house remote position, but I was in-house and I got laid off. And
Oh man,
people who are pure freelancers were like, yeah, my clients just kind of went radio silent and they're drying up. And it really changed. And all of a sudden, clients figured out, hey, we can use Chat GPT, we can use Jasper, all these other, I mean, there's hundreds of them now, these
sure,
tools to generate the kind of writing that people like I do. And it's unnerving. It's very, it's really, and the fact of the matter is, and I heard a very top level respected writer that I've learned from talk about this on a podcast himself a couple of weeks ago. And he said, I think there's still going to be a place for the very elite top level copywriters. And if you're happy just doing, cleanup work, like have the AI do it, and then the company hires you to just polish it and edit it, and you're not really doing real creating, but you're just, if you want that low level work, that's going to be out there too. But there's a big space in the middle that is going to get displaced by AI. And here's the thing, we writers are like, whoa, no machine is ever gonna write as good as me. Well, the fact is, I was working with a guy on some Facebook ads last year, a couple years ago, and before all this stuff hit, and we were I was giving him all the we were testing all these different Facebook ads to see, okay, what headline's going to work, what body copy is going to work, all this stuff. And and then we started realizing, well, yeah, I could spend like 3 hours doing that, or I could just get one of these AI tools and have that spit out the same thing. And it did. And we
whoa,
tested it, and then we figure out which one did the best, and that's the one you roll with. And all of a sudden, people I know that started using these tools, maybe the clients weren't using them yet, but we were, all of a sudden, we're doing the same amount of work that used to take maybe 2 weeks. Now it takes 2 days. Used to take 2 days. Now it takes 2 hours. Used to take 2 hours. Now it takes 2 minutes. I mean, I'm not exaggerating at
right,
all. So those of
that's
us who
wild.
are using the tool, so I use it as a tool to help me, but that's where I see my role and why I'm not worried about AI, because I see my role as more of an advisor to businesses and to individuals. I'm like, okay, the writing stuff, okay, let's just accept the fact that AI is here, it's here to stay, it's not going away. And unless you are truly like a top level copywriter or author or whatever, yeah, I mean, AI can write some
Yeah,
pretty good stuff. So we have to figure out, like, okay, well, what, the machines aren't going to take over the world and like all of us are just going to be like living on universal basic income because there's no jobs. We still have to find out, like, we have to figure out, like, where are we needed? Like, where is my brain? This is what I tell people all the time. Where's your brain needed? Like, what, let's put aside writing for a second. What are two things that you can do for a client? You can come up with ideas that they wouldn't have come up without you, and you can solve, talking about problems, you can solve problems that they maybe don't know how to solve. Now, maybe the way to solve those problems is by using some tools and some technology and some apps that are new on the scene.
yeah,
Hey, whatever, but they still need someone to guide them. And that's why I say what I do now is and it sounds kind of generic, but it's what I do. But I apply it to people's individual situations, but I help people navigate uncharted waters, which there's a lot of these days, and find a clear path forward in business and in life. And that's so I know that sound. I
Yeah,
can get.
no, I understand what you mean. It's kind of like what's going to happen is, and this is a prediction of mine. I'm not saying that this is exactly before 10 years later. This is not at all what happened, but I could see that this could happen is when AI is turning everyone into copywriters.
Yeah.
It's now a tool. So in the way that the calculator made everyone mathematicians. Do you know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah. Yeah.
it used to be that you would have to ask someone who knew a lot of math to divide big numbers or to calculate certain percentages of like certain things. And then the calculator came out and people were like, well, there's going to be no need for mathematicians anymore. No, it just means that the
Mm,
things that were a lot more complicated, we now have a tool that can expedite this.
yeah.
So now we can all be copywriters. But just because the machine exists to create excellent phrasing or beautiful blah, blah, blah,
Hmm.
and logos and all the stuff that
Yeah.
AI can do does not mean that someone still has to push 2 + 2 equals for it to tell you that it's 4, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
learning how to navigate the tool is going to be the creativeness. Your creativity goes into that
Yeah.
now, right? Because
Yeah.
then after being able to do the calculator and the computer itself, we were able to go to space, which was a new creative thing. Which does that make sense? Like
Yeah.
before
Yeah.
before
Yeah.
we could make mass calculations that fast, that's why that was part of the issue is we couldn't figure out these
Mm,
problems fast enough. But then this tool came along that could expedite all of that, and we just grew faster. So the creativity then became how do we apply the tool to get to
yeah.
the a
Yeah.
thing that we never even thought possible? How do we get to
Yeah.
space with AI now?
Yeah.
And in your world, it's just learning to use the creativity. Okay, so we can't beat it. Have it join us, and then we get creative about how to use it in our favor to help it. Help us get ahead of the next person over. I think.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a great way to put it. And then along with that too, more and more, I just think people want to be with people. Like, okay, even if I could get all my answers from a machine, from I still like I kind of like interacting with people. And I just tell people all the time, just be the kind of person that people want to, and this is a selling thing, it's just selling yourself. But if you're interesting, if you're an interesting person, you have interesting ideas, you're kind of an enthusiastic person that people want to be around, um, you're not gonna have a problem finding work to do and finding people that want to pay you and finding ways to sell your own stuff, even if
Right.
nobody is employing you. You're doing it with your podcast. So there's so many more opportunities to do that these days than ever in creative spaces. So I think it's an amazing time we live in. I'm not at all threatened by the AI and the tools, and I'm going to use them as much as I can. But more and more, I'm just kind of building my own and creating my own like world. Like
Yeah.
I do these things that I'm like, I don't know if anyone's going to come along. I don't know if anyone's going to this next book I'm going to write. I don't know if anyone's going to buy it. This retreat experience I'm putting on in Savannah, Georgia. I don't know if anyone's going to come along, but you know what? I have this idea in my head. I'm creating it. I put out some messages to sell it. Guess what? People signed up for it. They're coming. We're going to
Yeah.
have an event. We're going to have an experience. And that's what people more and more, and I always keep coming back to this idea of community and relationships is that, okay, even in spite of all these cool tools and things we can do, and our time is, we can get so much more done in the same amount of time than we used to. We still we still want to be around people. We're human beings. We still want to hang out with other people and do cool things with other people. So if you can find cool things to do with other people and get them to pay you for whatever that is, a service, a product, they just like you, they want to be in your world somehow. And but the challenge is then, okay, well, how? How, and that's why this is why I have a business, Andres, is because
Yeah.
people are confused by these things. And the fact is not that I have it all figured out either, but I'm trying to figure it out myself. But I've gotten pretty good at doing this and figuring it out. And I like having conversations with people, and I like figuring things out, and I like helping people. And I don't know, up so far so good. And it's I don't
Yeah.
know.
You're understanding the game more. Plus, your experience is valuable, even if like
Yeah.
AI is doing something to your world that's unheard of or unprecedented, right? So you're still able to put it this way: everybody can figure out how to calculate, like the growth of a mortgage or a loan on a
Right.
calculator, but nobody understands the math enough to type it into the calculator, even though the calculator can totally do that, pretty
Yeah.
easily. So
Yeah.
you're still out there
Yeah.
like learning all of these things about the topic itself. You're still a student in the
Yeah.
game. You're
Yep.
still immersing yourself in the psychology of people
Right.
to be able to use the tool even better. That's genius. That's a great approach.
Yeah,
Nice
and
job,
you
Steve.
yeah, well, thank you, Andres, and you're actually you're catch I must be explaining it somewhat okay because you're the way you summarized it right there is perfect. Yeah, that's exactly
Thanks.
it.
I,
Yeah.
you're, I'm out here taking notes. I'm watching. I'm listening.
I can see the wheels spinning up there, man.
Oh, that's so fun. I'm sure we're gonna intertwine with some more copyright stuff as we go along with the book stories. But I did want to rewind the clocks and ask you about your time in Southwestern,
Yeah, yeah, sure. Yeah.
especially because this is the part that like the reason we're here is because you sold
Yeah,
books.
yeah.
If you didn't sell books, it'd be like this has been a great conversation, but
Let's
now we got
let's
nothing.
let's actually start the podcast right now.
55, great introduction. 55 minutes of intro. Here we go. Okay, so let's wind the clocks back. You're sitting in Wisconsin, minding your own damn business, and someone comes up to you and says, "Hey, what are you doing this summer?" Or I guess I'm assuming. Well,
Yeah,
how
yeah.
did you first hear about this magical internship?
Yeah, so at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, great school, by the way. Had a
I,
good
as a Nebraska fan, I'm gonna just
okay, you're a Cornhusker.
agree to
Okay,
disagree.
yeah. Um, but had a good experience there in a lot of ways, academically, socially, and business-wise with Southwestern. But yeah, end of my freshman year, I had so I grew up about an hour away. So my hometown was about an hour away. So I didn't go that far away to school, but it was the big city, Madison, the big school.
Yeah.
And freshman year, you go home at Thanksgiving, you go home at Christmas. I went home at spring break. So spring break, I still did not have anything lined up for the summer. And I went back home and I had worked at a restaurant in high school and I went back and did that for a week at spring break just to make some money. And I'm like, there is no way in the world I'm coming back to Waukesha, Wisconsin to work at a restaurant this summer. No way. So more than anything, I just was looking for anything to get away from home. And I felt kind of, even at that age, I was 19, I felt kind of self-sufficient. I was paying for school. I'm like, I didn't want to like go back and live with my mom and dad. And I have 4 brothers and sisters. I'm like, it's going to be a crowded house again. I'm like, no offense, mom and dad, if you're listening to this later. But you would have cramped my style. Um, but so I was looking for anything to get away. But in the student newspaper, back in the 80s, they still had newspapers. There was 2 student newspapers, and one of them was called the Daily Cardinal. And I think they had I think Southwestern people had put a classified ad in the back,
Hold on.
summer work, and
Hold on. You do copyright right now. You're telling me that you got into Southwestern because you saw an ad on the paper.
yes. So it wasn't somebody that approached me. I didn't know anybody that did it.
You were
Somebody,
destined for all of this, man.
it was destiny. Yeah, yeah.
You
Uh,
saw an ad on the paper. I don't think there might have been like 2 other people that we heard. Like saw an ad on the school paper,
this was
and then you're now in
well,
copyright.
again, I'm dating. I realize I'm totally dating myself on some of these things. And
No, that's so funny, man.
if we get into other bookfield stories, I'm going to be totally dating myself. They're like, who's this? People would be watching. They'd be like, who's this boomer? But yeah, back in those days. So this was 1986, freshman year. Um, they actually did that, and actually, I think for a few years there in the 80s, at Wisconsin, anyways, this is how they recruited a lot of people. So they put these ads in the paper. You would call a number, leave a message. Well, my student manager, a guy named Dan Jones, apparently for like a month after, like this was right before spring break, and I'd kind of forgotten that I had filled this out, or called or left a message. And apparently he had been trying to call me for a month. This is before the days of cell phone. We didn't even have like voicemail on our phones in the dorms and stuff. So he's trying to call me.
This is 1986. Were beepers a thing yet?
I don't even think beepers were a thing, I never had one anyways. But so he finally gets a hold of me. He's like, hey, we're doing these interviews at Howard Johnson's hotel on, campus. And I thought it was like some corporate job. And I'm like, oh yeah, I'll be there, for sure. Well, it was the Southwestern interview. JT Olson was the guy running the interview.
Legend.
I was pretty impressed. And I did not have to think about it. I did not have to go home and ask my mom and dad. I did not have to. I'm like, yeah, where do I sign? I'm in. And mainly, and 2 things got me. One was one was the opportunity to get out of Wisconsin for sure. Um,
Understandable.
the money, of course, was a draw, and there was, the student manager plants in the audience that were like, "Oh, so tell us, Troy, how much did you make last summer?" And however I don't know how they do it nowadays, but it was a very well-oiled machine.
Still that way. Some things don't
Yeah,
ever change.
yeah. So it was very impressive, but more than anything, I was impressed with JT Olson. Incredibly impressed. I was a
Yeah.
freshman, and I was impressed with the student managers who spoke and gave their little testimonial. But what caught me is two things. I don't know if they ever use this line, but this was one of JT's things. He said, U.S. News and World Report did a report that said 15% of your success in life is going to be due to technical knowledge, but 85% due to people knowledge. And I'm like, huh. So I was kind of thinking about that, and then I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. And then the other thing he said was, if you learn how to sell, you'll always be employed. You'll always have a job. You'll always be able to make really good money. And as a freshman who was debating whether I was going to continue in engineering or not, because it was harder than I thought, and I'm like, I don't know if I want to do that. It just sounded adventurous. So that's my story. And I think it was maybe 4 weeks later. This was toward the end of school. 4 weeks later, I was traveling down to Nashville and getting into this. So I didn't have a lot of time to think about it, didn't have a lot of time to prepare, but I just knew, like, I'm going to do this. And my student manager even came and did a parent visit. Like, my dad came to school one time to visit, and Dan did a parent meeting right there in my dorm room with him. And I think most of my family, my parents for sure, most of my friends, my family, well, they learned later, they thought for sure it was a cult, but even in the beginning, they're like, they did not think that this was going to be a good idea. They thought I was going to be, maybe, okay, give it a shot. They were supportive, but I think they thought that I was going to come back after 2 weeks. But my freshman roommate Mike was the one guy that said, "Man, that sounds." He had something else lined up for the summer, but he said, "Man, that sounds really cool, Steve. I think you're going to do well." And he was very supportive and thought it was the coolest thing. And that just else here outside of Southwestern that thinks this is a good idea.
Huge, huge for the program at that point. Wow. So
Yeah.
where did
Yeah.
you go?
So my first summer I spent in upstate New York, two towns, Hornell, New York, and
No
Corning, New
way.
York. Yeah.
You sold in Hornell?
Yeah.
This summer I sold in Hornell. Well, we were stationed at Hornell. We ended up living in Canisteo, which is just south
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
there. Like just living
Canisteo was
city on
like
the hill.
my third week of the summer. I was in
I
Canisteo.
sold
Yeah.
my first summer I sold Canisteo, Wellsville.
Uh,
There's a town down there called Whitesville.
okay. I didn't
And
hit that
like
one.
way down south, almost at the border of Pennsylvania. And
Okay.
I was like the only brown man in Whitesville. I tell a story about being the only brown man in Whitesville. It was awesome.
Mm.
It's
Yeah.
beautiful,
So
beautiful
that's where.
territory.
Yeah, that was the first time I had been really
Oh,
anywhere east of like Indiana. So I had never been out east, so that was new to me, being from Wisconsin, and yeah, it was an
uh,
experience,
I
and
sold over you, man. That's so funny. It's great territory.
yeah, well, you didn't see a whole lot of books from my first summer. No, I mean, I won the
That's funny.
Sizzler trip. I sold 1,600 units or something, 1,584, but it had a decent first summer, and but
Yeah.
it really did take. I mean, it was a shock to the system. It's like, throwing yourself into something that is just completely foreign. I wasn't a natural at it. But I was committed. I was committed to my student manager, and I was committed to JT. Everybody remembers that, end of sales goal, and I don't know how they do it now, but you have a little one-on-one for a few
Yeah.
minutes with your sales
The
manager, and
student manager
you
creed.
know,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
I count on you, da da da, and all this stuff. And I'm like, I took that stuff very, very seriously, and there was no way I was going to quit, even if I hadn't sold. Even if I hadn't made any money that summer. And for those of you watching that don't know, so, but I mean, I got a check for $3,000 and, made
Yeah.
whatever, which, this was
I was
1986,
gonna say in '86, that's and when school was cheaper and living was so much cheaper, $3,000 in the summer was good money.
Yeah, yeah, that paid for half of my next year's school, and I already
That's
already had money
wild.
saved up from before that, and then I continued to get better each summer after that, of course. Um, but anyways, it was a
So
learning
cool.
experience. It was a struggle, a major struggle for me, especially the first few weeks. But I
I was
knew
gonna
I knew I was going to come back at the end of the summer too, though.
those are the two questions I like to ask normally. This is typical questions of the show is tell me a little bit about your first, like about your firsts, and it could be as many as you can remember, or the ones that kind of stick out to you of like either your first store or your first customer, first day, first week, first follow day. The first I think are always the ones that just we all
Yeah,
relate to the most because we're all at zero. You know what I'm saying? And your
yeah.
last summer, my last summer could have been different, but the first day was probably very the same, especially in the same area.
Yeah, yeah, so I get my student manager drops me off. I still remember the address, 10 Rockwell Street in Hornell, New York.
Oh my gosh!
Up on a little hill. I could find it today if I went back there.
Here, hold
But
on.
I
You keep
just remember
talking. I'm gonna find it.
I
What is it?
remember 10 Rockwell Street. Um, so I remember Dan dropping me off. He had a car. Me and my other roommate Tom were walkers, and he drops me off on one spot, Tom off on the other. And he's like, "Well, we'll see you tonight. Good luck," And I'm like, I know I probably looked really pathetic all day because I'm just, you're walking around, going door to door. You don't know what you're doing. I think I sold a My Fun with Words and a cookbook that first day, maybe 8 units or something like that.
Good times, man.
And I remember going back at the end of the summer, when you finally have more confidence and you finally know what you're doing and stuff and delivering books. And I remember delivering the cookbook to the first lady who I sold. And she said, "Yeah, was that your first day?" I said, "Yeah." She's like, "I could kind of tell." and she said, "I
It
kind of,"
was obvious to us.
and she said, "I kind of felt sorry for you." But the funny thing is, so my roommate Tom took one half of Hornell. I took the other half. Um, yeah, I think it's right down that street there. I think it's the one. It's
I'm
one of those. It's a two-story house, and we lived in the top, the third story where there's like a window and a sunlight kind of thing on this
sorry.
house. We
Oh, dang. That way?
so,
Yeah.
yes, we lived in like the attic part of it,
No, down this way.
down this street, I think. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. It doesn't let me
Oh
put the
man,
man on the street down there.
this is like bringing back. I didn't know you were going to do this, Andres. Wow.
I know. Send us this for people. You cried on this corner right here on a Tuesday.
Yeah,
I know it. I know it.
that's probably where I sat down for half an hour eating my lunch and then yeah, wondering what the heck I was doing. Um,
Sorry to derail you with this. I just had to throw it up there. Okay, go ahead.
yeah, that's funny. Anyways, so yeah, after 1 week, we both come back and report to our student manager, Dan. We're like, well, you know, where next? Where to next? He's like, what are you talking about? Where to next? This is your territory for the summer. I'm like, no, we're done. He finished his half. I finished my half. I think I don't know what it is now, but I think at the time Hornell was maybe 10,000 people. I don't know, 5 to 10,000 people, but we should not have finished it in one
Yeah.
week. So he's like, here,
The rule of thumb was about you would spend what is it, a week per every 1,000 or
okay,
something like that
okay,
was the yeah. So yeah,
yeah.
there's no way.
So anyways, he's like, here's what we're gonna do next Monday. On Monday, Steve, you're gonna work Tom's territory. He's gonna work yours. You're gonna switch because you guys didn't sell a whole lot of books. You didn't get a lot done, and we're gonna work this tighter. And so we did. And so just to tell you, my first week was 84 units, and then I actually went down my second week. It was 79 units.
Oh,
So I didn't even hit that 80 benchmark. But anyways, so Tom comes back after the first night or two. He's like, "Yeah, a lot of people have been saying they saw you out kind of walking around, but you weren't really doing anything. It looked like you were lost." So, obviously I didn't know what I was doing, but but the turnaround came on Monday of my third week. I got to work with a student manager. So I didn't really work with anybody those first 2 weeks.
wow. Usually
Um,
you're supposed to follow like the first couple of days.
yeah,
That's
I
rough.
didn't
That's brutal.
I didn't really do that. So third third week, Monday, I go to another town and work with a guy who's still one of my great friends today, Jack Leapak. And I got to work with Jack for the day. And he was a second year guy and he had done fairly well his first year. And just a very charismatic guy. And I watched him work for a day and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is how I'm like, okay, now I see what I was doing wrong. And so in 5 days of my third week, I doubled what I did my first week. So I had 100. These numbers are still in my head. I had 168 units my third week in 5 days, and then from that point on, the summer was pretty good, and I hit 200 units a few times, and never got into the threes and fours or President's Club, but stumbled and bumbled my way to the Sizzler trip, and it was a good experience, and that was
Epic.
my first summer. So
Where was your breakfast spot? I wonder if it's the same place.
I don't know the name of it, but I'm totally dating myself now too. People are going to be like, what? So we found this breakfast place somewhere downtown Hornell. It was a little diner, greasy spoon kind of place, typical, but they had a $1 special. So and we were so cheap that I didn't even like order orange juice or coffee or anything. They had a $1 special. You got like 2 eggs, 2 pieces of toast. That was your breakfast. And it was
Yes.
so all three of us, me and Dan and Tom, we would order the breakfast special, and then we would leave a quarter a quarter tip on the table. So they made a whopping $3.75 from us every day.
Look out.
But again, this is back in the day and old times. But I was a master, Andres, at mooching food off of people, off of customers. Like, and I don't know, again, maybe people were feeling sorry for me, or this guy looks skinny, he needs to eat. And you'd bring your lunch along, that kind of thing, whatever people did, whatever we did. But man, if somebody was eating a pizza or something, like, just looking over at it or something would, bring the invitation. Hey, do you want some? Do you want to sit down and eat with us? This is the only time I got off schedule. It was just eating like dinner with people. It's like, people would invite me in and be like, well, we're just about to eat. Do you want to,
Godspeed.
can we fix you a plate, or, that kind of thing. So
Yeah.
my expenses were really, really low that first summer.
It's not off schedule. It's low expenses. Sometimes
There
you
you
got to
go.
make exceptions to rules with other rules. There's
Yeah.
warm food, home cooked meal.
Yeah.
It's raining outside. You don't have to buy new supplies, and you saved on dinner. That's
Yeah.
a couple of units right there.
But we had fun, and my roommate and I, so Dan was the student manager. He had a car. Tom and I both walked, but we had a blast that summer. And we rode bikes. We either walked, rode, and it got to the point where Dan didn't even like drop us off at places. He was doing his own thing out in the country. It was up to us to find our next territory. Like, okay, somehow I get to Canastillo, somehow get to Bath, New York, somehow get to
Bath.
all these places. Yeah.
Oh
So,
yeah.
Bath too.
Oh yeah.
And so we rode our bikes. I was in good shape that summer. We rode our bikes, and we became masters at hitchhiking.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I ever told my folks all this stuff, but we hitchhiked everywhere, and I just didn't think anything of it. I'm like, what's going to happen to you out in upstate New York? Some country people are picking you up hitchhiking. What's the big deal? And we always had good experience with hitchhiking. So
just serial killers out there, no problems though. just Ted Bundy going. Wasn't that his prime at 8 years? Yeah. To hear, on a serious note, to hear that is like the biggest. I think there's been like 3 major like changes that I don't know exactly when they happened all around, but when they went from like going backwards in time, when they switched from all paper to iPads in like 2017.
Okay. Yeah.
That was like what I mean by like major shifts in the culture of like kids today selling books will never understand setting a written bar by mail or having paper maps, like
Yeah.
the savagery of paper maps, right? But then kids like from my era will not there was at some point they stopped hitchhiking. Something must have happened. I don't know when they stopped hitchhiking, but
Yeah. Yeah.
Something must have happened where they're like, okay, no more hitchhike. Because now you have to call. Maybe it's when cell phones came
Yeah.
out. They were like, all right, now you gotta wait for someone to come pick you up.
Yeah.
But when
Yeah.
I hear of people hitchhiking, I'm like, you savage, you crazy people, just getting into
Oh,
cars of strangers, hoping that they were gonna take you where you needed to go.
yeah.
That's
Yeah.
brave.
It was kind of fun, and mostly Tom and I did it together, but there were times where I hitchhiked by myself,
You get a
and,
demo in there. Just, hey, by the
yeah,
way,
yeah,
just so you know what I'm doing.
totally.
Does the drive 20 minutes? Perfect.
There we
I got
go.
some stuff to say to you.
Exactly. Yeah,
Oh, that's good stuff.
yeah. Oh,
So, how
man.
did you know you wanted to come back? I mean, I'm sure I can guess, but I always like asking this part specifically because at some point you had to have been like, oh, there's like that, there's a wave, right? Of what did I get myself into? Oh, this is what I got myself into. Okay, this isn't so bad. Okay, I'm coming back. And to go from what did I get myself into to how did I
Yeah,
come back is
I I
is
think
a
I think
journey.
I think probably 3rd or 4th week of the summer, I already knew, even though, again, I
Ooh,
wasn't that good at it, I knew that I was into s I just knew I was in something pretty good, and I knew I was surrounded by really sharp people, and it helped to see people like, you've maybe heard this name before in the past, Frank Monzo, who one year he was like the number 2 guy in the company, back in the late 80s. But
I have
anyways,
heard
I saw people like him making like gobs of money, and I saw people like, oh, I can't
Zizzy, Rosen, Michelle
Michelle,
Maloney.
yeah, Michelle Maloney, and
Yeah.
this was even before Bill Zizzy and,
Yeah, because they were like in the early '90s, but Michelle was
yeah,
crushing the late '80s.
Michelle was, I'm like, "Oh my goodness, now if I could get anywhere close to her realm," you know? And so I just knew that, okay, I was pretty bad at this to start with. I made some decent money. I stuck with it. I just knew that I could come back and make more. And the next summer I grew like to 2784 or something like that. So hit the
That's
growth
good.
award,
Yeah,
and then, got up into the 4,000s a couple of summers, 4,000 some unit, mid 4,000, so 45, 4,600
yeah.
units. So,
You're
I
cooking.
was never the top. I was in top sales 2 years in the book, and I was, in the next category 2 the other years, I think, or the other years. But in any case, I knew that I could get better at it, and I also knew I didn't have a whole lot of options for the summer. I'm like, I don't know where else I'm going to make this kind of money in at this time and for the summer. And like when I finally got good at it, my 4th summer, I mean, between my bonus check and my end of the year check, I mean, I made 20,000 after expenses. I made $20,000. I'm like, that was pretty good money back in 1989. Now I know
Right.
it's not record setting stuff like the Bulgarians are doing these days, but um I'm amazed.
Have you heard about that?
Oh my gosh, yeah. Yeah.
It's outrageous.
Yeah.
Outrageous. I met
Yeah.
most a couple of them when I was in Bulgaria. We were in Bulgaria a couple weeks ago, and Peter, the
Yeah.
guy that has the record now, stayed at my house a little bit, and just like asking him about like, how do you? He goes, oh, I just do this. I'm like, you freak.
Yeah. Well, I've met Rado. I don't know if you know
Yeah,
Rado,
I know
but
Rado.
so I
We met. We went to the park when we were there. Yeah,
yeah, so I had a chat. I've had a chat with him on Zoom, so we know each other. He knows a good friend of mine. Um, but anyways, I knew that I could make some good money at it,
yeah.
and more than anything, I really liked the people. I mean, I like not the customers, not knocking on doors people, but I mean they were nice. That was fine. But I liked the people I was working with. I liked the camaraderie, and
Yeah.
I knew that somehow that would rub off on me, and it did. My student manager rubbed off on me. People like Jack Lepak and Frank Monzo and JT. You know, I got some of that stuff that they had.
Not bad. Not bad to learn from. Not bad to be surrounded by. Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
and at that age, and you don't realize, and I didn't realize it till years later. I'm like, man, how many people get that opportunity at that age, at 19, 20, 21, to be mentored? I mean, sometimes when you get out in your career and if you get a good position, you have a good manager and you're mentored by a certain person, but how many people get mentored by sharp people like that at 19, 20, 21, and to have the experience that we had? That's just, and I didn't really realize the full extent of that at the time, but Man, that's a pretty cool thing, isn't
Absolutely, absolutely. And this is not to knock on
it?
the generation of children that are now in their college years, but I will say, just because I have a brother who's in college right now. So my younger brother, I recruited, so he's out of college and has a family and kids and stuff. But my youngest brother, he's in college, and sometimes, you meet. When he was a freshman, particularly when I was still in Lincoln, I'd go and see him in his dorm or go hang out with him or whatever.
Mm,
And you'd meet current college kids, or I have my wife's nieces and nephews I've married into. Some of them are in college, and you meet some of their friends and stuff. You're like, wow, you could use this opportunity. Like this for you. If people are still selling books, and if you went and did this, it would help you stand out more than ever. I
yeah.
feel like
Oh, yeah.
because of what we talked about, right? Because you're proof of it right now. There's people out in the world who are excellent copywriters who didn't get this experience and so
Mm,
have no idea how to take their really beautiful products, they're pretty amazing products, probably their copywriting
yep.
products,
Right.
and go, hey, this is worth something because XYZ.
Yeah.
That's it's hard, and it's hard to witness because you're like, oh,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and they're more skeptical now about it. There's less people selling books nowadays, which
Right.
in a
Right.
lot of ways sucks.
Yeah.
Um, so it's interesting how people like you said it. That's a great question. How many different opportunities exist out there for kids at that age to be surrounded by those kinds of people to learn those kinds of things?
Yeah.
Not many. It's kind of
It's so much of it's in, and you know this too, but so much of it's intangible. I mean, you could look at,
yeah,
what people talk about in the Southwestern experience. Okay, we learned selling skills, we learned persistence, we all these tangible things, but there's and I can't quite even put my finger on it, but there's an intangible factor too that you just having gone through that experience, you have a little extra confidence and a little extra, I don't even want to call it charisma, but you have more confidence about you. You have more resilience about you. You have things that are just ingrained in you that you don't even think about because you did this really difficult thing.
yeah. There's
You
like
know?
I don't know. It's like confidence is probably the closest word, but it's this. And this is probably just a synonym of confidence, but it's just this assurance that no matter Shane Hertig and I have talked about this a lot. He's another book guy. He goes, worst case scenario, I know that I can at least somewhere go pick up a backpack, put
Yeah.
some sample books in it, and I can go make 5 grand
Yeah.
in the next
Yeah.
couple of weeks. Like I can do, like but if
Yeah.
I was all my family left me, I'm really in a bad spot. You know, maybe mentally you'd have a hard time. But
Hmm.
generally speaking, like you can still have that be like, I can do this. I can do this at least. And
Yeah.
so, two questions I have to ask you, and then probably some stories. But and I'm sure other stories will come out of this. But how did you meet your wife? People who
Mm,
marry book people, I always be
mm.
like, tell me about that. And then two, I will ask you, tell me about this rogue 1993 summer. But we'll, we'll go, whichever one makes more sense that
Well,
you chronologically to you.
yeah, actually they tie in. So I'll
Oh, good.
tell I'll tell the 2-year gap story first. So I get done selling books 5 summers, and my fourth summer, which I'll come back to at the end in the ponytails segment, but um that was my best summer. It was a magical summer. And then my fifth summer, which I graduated in May, and then I went out and sold books that summer. And I just fully expected that to be my last summer. And it turned out to not be such a great summer. So this is embarrassing to say. I decreased in units. Uh,
Oh no!
but
Don't worry.
it
Don't
is
worry, dude. My
it is
third or fourth summer, I was way off schedule. My first summer, I hit like 4,000 units, PCs, pace setter, all the accolades. I was on top of the world, but alas, I flew too high, and I crash landed on my third and fourth summer. So don't worry,
well,
you're in good
we could
company.
we could probably talk more about that off stage sometime. But yeah, so similar thing. Fourth summer, everything I touched just turned to gold, and it was just a magical summer in a lot of ways, which I'll come back to later. But um, fifth summer, in part of this was I think I knew it was going to be my last summer, and I was looking ahead to my career, and I was done with school already, and I was just ready to move on. Um, and part of it was the territory. No offense to anybody that
It
lives
matters.
in Kentucky or is from Kentucky, and I don't care. Yeah, I don't care what they tell you in sales school. all territory is not the same.
It matters.
Um,
It matters. And listen, there's things that we've said on this podcast that have that have irked current book kids and even alumni, where they're like, attitude is everything. No, it's like 90% of it. Or when they say like, but one of the most like agreed upon within the alumni community is territory 100% matters. There
yeah.
is such a thing as shitty territory, and there's like really good territory. It just happens. Sorry, sorry,
Yeah.
kids.
Well,
Burst that bubble, right?
yeah, and it probably, yeah, probably the current, leadership in Southwestern probably doesn't like us saying this, but yeah,
Oh, good,
territory,
good.
territory matters. Like
It for sure matters.
Wisconsin and Michigan is better than Louisiana and Mississippi. I'm sorry, no, no offense. But anyway, so I'm in Kentucky. I'm in Richmond, Kentucky, which that city itself was okay, but I didn't work. There were people that lived there that worked the city and the suburbs around there, but below that, well, if you look on a map, you can just see where it is, and it's like kind of getting into the foothills of the Appalachians. It's old coal mining country that has seen its better days even back then, and it's just poor. Like Jackson County, Kentucky is, I think at the time it was considered like the second poorest country in the country. That was my territory.
Fun.
And so I went from 4,600 some units to three. I ended up squeaking out 3,000, but it was a challenging summer. I was in OL again. So 3 of my summers, my third, fourth, and fifth summers, I was an organizational leader as well as selling. Um, but anyway, so I was eager to get on with my career. I was glad to be done with the that summer. Not the book experience as a whole. The whole experience was still really good, but I was eager and went through the Southwestern placement service, interviewing different jobs and things like this. Well, I tried one thing for a very short time that wasn't a good fit, and I won't talk about that. But my first real job after selling books was with a company called Matthew Bender, and they were a legal publishing company based in New York City. And my territory was going to be Madison, Wisconsin, and then I ended up moving up to Minneapolis for a while. But basically, my job was to call on law offices, and this was, again, I'm dating myself, but this was back in the day when lawyers still used books, like before everything was online. And so we would sell them these series of books published by Matthew Bender. Well, it was a good job, and it was made good money. Did not great at it, but fairly well. But it got to a point, I was up in Minneapolis and things were happening within the company and they were merging divisions and this and that. Well, I was newer, and this other guy in the same territory that they were merging had been around for 10 or 12 years. Long story short, I lost my job. Call it getting downsized, getting fired, whatever. I wasn't doing as well as the other guy and I lost my job. This was April. So I had been away from the book field all of 91, all of 92. This is now spring of 1993. So like it's April and I'm like out of a job and I'm like, oh man, this kind of sucks. And I certainly could have got any other job, another sales job in Minneapolis. I could have done well, but I'm like, you know what? I said, I wonder, so I'm going to call my old buddy JT. And so I called JT and I'm like, hey, explain my situation. I said, what would you think about me coming out and selling books again this summer? I needed to be honest, Andres, I needed to clear my head, and I was like really bummed out about this thing because I thought this was going to be a long-term thing. And I was really crushed that I essentially got fired.
That's tough.
And so he's like, yeah, I'd love to. He's like, our first sales goal is starting in 2 weeks. I'm like, yeah, let's do it. And so end of April, this is like middle of May, I decide to go down there. So he puts me in with some people that some people I had known before, but a lot of new people, of course. Faces changed, and here I am. You got to understand too, at this point now, I'm 26 years old. So I'm like older than everybody else. And I didn't want to explain my situation. Like, yeah, everybody knew I had sold books, but they knew I had been away for a couple of years, and I didn't want to go into detail. So I just didn't talk about it. And I think some people knew, and they just knew not to ask me. And so we just didn't talk about it. But it was the best thing that could have ever happened to me, because it did clear my head. It got me back doing something, even though I had been away for 3 years. I got right back into it. Like those skills, they come back to you.
Riding a bike.
It is. And so my headquarters was South Bend, Indiana, and there was a little town called LaPorte, Indiana, just west of there between South Bend and Chicago. And I worked that county, whatever county it is. I don't know the name of it, but I worked the rural territory. And I picked up right where I left off my fourth summer, kind of blocked the fifth summer out of my head, blocked the last 2 years out of my head and some other stuff that had been going on. And I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to focus and just have fun with this. And there was no pressure. I'm just going to do it. And I picked up and I had President's Club again. I got top sales again. I had right at my best summer. So my 2 summers, my fourth summer and my sixth summer, were probably about equal, around 4,600 units or something, somewhere in there. But I felt good about myself. And then I took some time in the fall because I had some money again, because I got a pretty decent sized check, and had some time because I didn't have to get a job right away. So I took that fall semester off, and I went to Paris with my sister, and I ran the New York City Marathon that fall, and I just did some other fun stuff. And then I started interviewing for jobs like in December and January. And that's when I started with Great American Opportunities. So anyways, it was but to come back to how I met my wife. So in sales school, coming back after being gone for 3 years, we're in sales school first night, and I get introduced to the group because some of them didn't know me. And I see this woman across the room, and I'm like, I don't know who she is or what her deal is, but I got to get to know her. And not, I don't mean it quite like that, but she was just very intriguing. She's from Nigeria. She had a kind of exotic look. She still does. She's beautiful. And there was something about her. I'll just be real here. There was just something about her eyes and her smile that just really grabbed me. And I'm like, I got to,
They struck you like that. My wife's the same way. I was like, oh.
So we talked a little bit in sales school, but on Sunday meetings we'd see each other, and we'd talk, and we got to be good friends. And then there was I'll save this for the rapid fire too if you ask it, but there was a day toward the end of the summer where she worked with me, and we were just really clicked. But then at the end of the summer, so we got to be good friends. And she tells me now, I don't even remember this, but a number of times that summer I wrote, old school again, I wrote her a letter, like a little letter, and sent it in the mail to her headquarters, just encouraging her, just saying, hey, hope you're having a good week, kind of thing. So it was kind of, just the start of something. But anyways, at the end of the summer, so we were just, it was platonic. We were completely platonic, just friends. And, but at the end of the summer, we decided to go back. We each had a car, but we decided to caravan to Nashville together to check out. So we get to Nashville, and we're like, neither one of us is in a hurry to check out or get back to home or anything. And I'm like, hey, what would you think about, like, let's just come back and do checkout later. Let's go to Graceland. So we road trip to Memphis together. So we kept her car. I think we kept it in the parking lot at Southwestern. But we kept her car there, and we drove to Memphis together and hung out doing all the Graceland, Beale Street, all this stuff in Memphis. Every American should make a pilgrimage to Graceland, by the way. But we just really connected and hit it off. And then we went to see my aunt and uncle in Alabama. And then we went to see a friend of mine in Atlanta, did kind of this big circle. Wow. And then we came back to Nashville like a week later and finally checked out, and then drove back. She had gone to the University of Illinois, but she was just finishing school, grad school. I had been out of school for a few years, but she had a job waiting for her in Chicago. I had a job, well, I was thinking of having, I was going to be interviewing in Madison, Wisconsin, but my family was there, and I wanted to go back to Wisconsin. She wanted to go back to Chicago, and we went our separate ways. We actually lost touch for 4 years. And
what?
Yeah. So we didn't, Yeah, I know. And we both had different situations going on, other relationships and things like this. So I won't go into all the detail there either. But 4 years later, out of the blue, she calls me, and like, oh, I mean, it was just like it's like it was like the happiest day of my life. August 28th, 1997.
I
She
was gonna
called
say
me.
this is 97. I can
Yeah,
feel
so this is
it.
yes, this is 1997. So this is 26 years ago now. And she called me and said, "Hey, what are you doing?" And this and that. And she came up to Madison, and we started dating. And 6 months later, we got engaged, and a month later, we got married. So um,
Nice.
yeah,
Look
so
at
it was a
you.
whirlwind courtship and marriage and stuff. And we've been married. It'll be 26 years in next April. So it's been 25 and a half years. So
April of 98, 98,
yep, yep.
98. Crazy year. Wow.
Yeah. So yeah. So it was a good thing. And the interesting. So if I hadn't, just you trace things backwards and connect the dots backwards. It's like, well, okay, if I hadn't sold books in the first place, and if she hadn't, but if if I hadn't lost my job
Done.
in Minneapolis, if I hadn't called JT, if I hadn't decided to do this crazy selling books things again at age 26. And by the way, she was the same age because she was in grad school. She had come here. She had gone to college in Nigeria. Then she came to grad school here. So she did this for 3 summers, 91, 92, 93, while she was in grad school. And she wasn't going to come back for her last summer because she's like, she's an artist. She's got her master's in fine arts. She didn't want to, she didn't need to sell books again. And
Sure.
she just wanted to get on with her career. But she decided at the last minute to do this, to sell books, like really at the last minute. Like her student manager didn't even know she was coming to Nashville, and she just showed up. And so
Oh,
so if those things hadn't happened, and she hadn't caught my eye and all this stuff. So anyways, so yeah,
it
it's
all
all
fell
good.
into place. It all works out.
It is. Yeah.
That's
So
awesome. I love that. Well, if she ever wants to be on the show, she's always welcome. Well, any book person, you already know.
she knows I'm doing it today, so she'll watch and she'll see what the experience is. And yeah, I've
Sounds
told
good.
her about it. So
Sounds good. Oh man. Let me run through some rapid fires, and this will
yeah,
bring
yeah,
out some stories,
yeah, yeah,
and then the ponytail.
yeah, yeah.
You believe we've been on for an hour and a half? Honestly, sometimes I look up and I'm like, dude,
Wow.
this goes so fast. I feel like it's been
It
like
does. It
45
does.
minutes.
Yeah. Yeah.
It just goes quick. It goes quick. Okay, so rapid fire questions. As you guys know, these are brought to you by Will Metcher. Thanks, Will. We love you. Go check out his coaching business. He's gonna laugh when he hears that. Okay, number one, Steve, favorite territory that you sold in. Why was it not Kentucky?
Yeah, not Kentucky. Sorry, Kentucky. Vermont. Vermont was my absolute
Uh,
best favorite territory. It was beautiful. I had
yes,
never been to Vermont before. It's like my favorite state for a lot of reasons, but part of it is because I had a good summer there. But yeah, my fourth summer I was in Vermont, and it was
same.
just
We're in Vermont,
magical. Our headquarters was Rutland, and I worked south from there, so
south
down
of
Highway
Rutland.
7.
Okay,
Yeah,
I was
down
more.
toward like down toward like Manchester, Dorset, Arlington,
Yeah,
a couple other little towns.
we lived in Wilkes-Barre, and then I went the other way. So, but
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
beautiful. It is beautiful, though, no doubt.
Yeah, yeah.
Favorite kind of turf? Country, big brick, low
Um,
income, high income.
yeah, I liked kind of upper middle class country.
Yes,
Um,
that is
you
the
know,
business right there.
yeah, because well, first of all, I like rural more than city because it's easier. It's just easier
All day.
knocking. They don't get you don't get doors slammed on you as much and
Cops
stuff. It's
call
just
on you. Yep.
yeah. So but and middle to middle upper middle because they've got money and
Yeah. They have money, but they're not too big brick-y. They're
yeah,
still middle
yeah,
enough that they care
yeah,
about education. Not
yeah,
that not that low income and high income families don't care about education, but mixed
yeah,
in with the fact that they have money, they
yeah,
do. There's like a part of they're like self-made middle class usually, or they're like
right,
mom's got a good
right,
job or dad's got a good job, and then the other one has a separate job and it works. But they're still like, yeah,
yeah,
go to school. It's important. So yeah, come talk to me about education. But
yeah, yeah.
no,
I
yeah,
always connected well with those people
yeah.
and just yeah. So that was definitely my favorite kind of territory.
Amen to that. Favorite advanced sales? If you listen to Advanced Sales. I don't know if you
Oh,
do.
you're talking about advanced sales
Yeah,
training
like
stuff?
the CD that you would pop in, or the
Um,
cassettes that you would pop into
um,
to 1975 Plymouth
there,
Fury.
yeah, 8-track tapes. There were two guys that I really liked listening to. Fred Prevost, if you know that
Yes.
name. So he was a very, very intense guy, like very like kind of like military like and very, very just serious and just. But he had a really great sales training. It was a cassette tape that I liked, and then Dave Kauser had another one.
Really?
Yeah, Dave Kauser had another one. I don't know if I'm saying his name right, Kauser.
Yeah,
Um,
cousin. He's the president now after that.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, but he had one, and I just loved the just I don't know, I loved his voice inflection. He would get like really, really excited about stuff, and he had this one about telling the story about when the rocket takes off, it's not going 5,000 miles an hour, but when it gets up there, and I don't know, just all kinds of cool stories and stuff. But it just I think I just liked listening to his voice, but all of them good, solid like sales stuff.
Love
So
that.
yeah.
Favorite HQ?
Um, Not just because of the territory, but Vermont also, it was this older guy, Chet. He was like 75 at the time, very distinguished guy, nice house. It was a nice house that we lived in. But the interesting thing is, and we got to be good friends with him, the three of us. And it was a good time for him because he had just lost his wife like a month or two before we showed up on his
Oh,
door. And he told us many times that summer that you guys like saved me. And this was like a really good thing this summer. So,
wow.
um, and then we kept in touch with him for many years after that. In fact, he came to Madison. He traveled from Vermont to Madison to see me and my two roommates, and we'd go out to breakfast and stuff. And he'd stay for a few nights in a hotel, and then he'd go back to Vermont. But we kept in touch with him. In fact, I stayed
Love
in
that.
touch with him for many years until he passed away. So that was a really special,
Yeah, you gotta love
really
those.
special H headquarters. Yeah.
I still keep in touch with some of my HQ folks.
Mm,
It's
that's
cool.
cool.
Yeah, I love that. Um, this one's if it applies to you, most famous person you met
Um,
while you were knocking.
I was racking my brain trying to think if I've ever met anybody famous, and I don't think I did. But my last summer on the bookfield, I sold books to Oprah Winfrey's next door neighbor. So at the time in the early 90s, Oprah had, besides living on the Gold Coast in Chicago, on wherever she lived, she had a place in a town called Rolling Prairie, Indiana, which is right near, it was in my territory. And she would come out there. She had a helicopter landing pad, and she would fly
Of
out on the
course.
weekends and stuff. Really, really nice spread. I didn't get to go right up to the house because there was a gate, but you could see the house from the road and stuff. But I got to know her neighbors, and I sold books to one of her next door neighbors, and they're like, "Oh yeah, she jogs on the road here." And so I was always like,
That's wild.
every opportunity I got, I was like circling back to that part of the territory because I'm like, I want to see Oprah on the road, because I would have stopped. I would have stopped and talked to her, because
Yeah.
you know
She
she
buys
was a
books, puts it at her club. If she had the club
oh
yet, imagine
can you
you would have
imagine
broken the record,
I would have had yeah
untouchable record, five
company
hundred
record,
thousand units. It's still
but
rolling. You'd get
yeah.
royalties right now from that.
Could you imagine the shout out from Oprah? Oh man. But anyway, so that was pretty cool. But her neighbors actually knew her. They're like, oh no, she's very friendly with all of us. She's been to our house, we've been to her house. And so
That's
I kept thinking all summer, I gotta meet Oprah. I gotta meet Oprah. Didn't
could have
happen.
been a good summer. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Favorite off schedule story, if you have one. We love off schedule stories.
Yeah, I'll try to make this one real quick. So my first summer, the only off scheduleness I did was like just sitting there moping for half an hour because I wasn't selling any books. I didn't go anywhere. I didn't have any fun.
Uh,
I stayed,
you didn't have the full experience.
I felt guilty.
Oh
So
yeah.
my second summer, same thing. I was like on schedule all summer, but toward the end of the summer, I think it was the last week, I was living in Pottsville, Pennsylvania, eastern Pennsylvania, just a little west of New Jersey. And I had an uncle at the time who worked in New York City on Wall Street, and I was going to go visit him. And so on this particular day that I chose, last week of the summer. I set out from Pottsville, Pennsylvania to New York City. Unannounced, by the way. I was just going to like show up at his office on Wall Street. I'm like, I don't know what I was thinking. But I get halfway across New Jersey and my car breaks down. I had this little Datsun 210 and the clutch went out in New Jersey. And so I had to leave the car there. Talking about hitchhiking, I had to hitchhike back. New York City was only about 2.5 hours, maybe 3 hours from my territory. I was about halfway. So I was about an hour and a half out in rural New Jersey. Had to leave my car there to get the clutch fixed. And I had to hitchhike back. Well, this guy that picked me up didn't drive me all the way back to my headquarters, but he dropped me off in Allentown, Pennsylvania, right by this movie theater. And I'm like, and I felt so guilty, Andres. I had like never done it. Well, aside from that day, I had never done anything fun getting off schedule. So I'm like, I'm going to go see a movie. And La Bamba was playing. Richie Valens, La Bamba, the movie about Richie Valens with Lou Diamond Phillips played the part. That was out that summer. And so I saw La Bamba.
Best movie ever saw.
What's that?
It's the best movie you ever saw. You sit in a cold, nice
totally.
and cool auditorium. You have a Coke and some popcorn. And you're like normalcy in the middle.
I'll never forget it. I'm like, so this is what like normal people do in the summer. They go to see movies. And then when the movie was done, I hitchhiked the rest of the way home. And a couple days later, my roommate took me back out to New Jersey to pick up my car, and that was it. But anyways, it was a fun time.
That's a great story.
Yeah.
Also, sometimes my wife will go to visit her parents for a few days because it just makes sense for her to do that with her mom and her family. Story for Bizzler. But she has to go and help out her dad, so she'll go visit him for a few days and hang out with her parents. And I'm by myself, and I haven't done this yet, but she's out of town this week. And there's like every fiber of me, I'm like, I want to go to the movies by myself. I learned this from the bookfield. There is a sheer bliss, especially if you go at like noon, like in the middle of the day, when there's nobody else in the theater, and it's almost like you got the theater to yourself. Maybe there's just the one person that is also like you. It's a good feeling to go to the movies by yourself. If you haven't tried it, I highly recommend. Steve knows this feeling. I know this feeling. It's bliss.
Yeah, I would recommend to everybody listening. Yeah, do it. Yeah, I'm a big fan of going to the movies by yourself. And I think that time, actually, I'm pretty sure that was the first time in my life I'd ever done that, going to see La Bamba when I was off schedule.
It's nice. And it's a little, there's a little bit of a thrill that you're off schedule, which you can't replace nowadays, but still some about like, I'm by myself watching this movie. It's nice.
Yeah, totally.
Okay. Three more. Best sales day. And now this could be in units, which usually people take it to be in units, but sometimes your best sales day is not the best day in units. It was just something else that happened. So you can take that as you wish. If it is in units, totally give it to us. But if not, whatever you think is your best day in sales.
Yeah, I think the best day in sales, I don't actually know how many units I sold that day, but it was the day on a Saturday afternoon that I hit President's Club for the first time. So this was my fourth summer. It took me till my fourth summer to hit President's Club. And I hit 609 that week, and it happened. And I got there on early Saturday afternoon, and then I added to it to end up with 609. But I remember the feeling when I sold a volume library, whatever it was that I got to that point. But just the feeling of finally, after like 3.5 years of finally hitting it, and just knowing that I was just on cloud nine, I mean, just knowing that I was going to get to go to the Sunday meeting the next day and finally stand up there for President's Club. And as the organizational leader too, I felt like I needed to set the example. But it was just such an incredible, satisfying feeling to even more than the money. And you add up the money, and it's like, for those of you watching that might not know, but I mean, that was like, again, it was like $2,000 in a week back in 1989. That was a lot of money for a week's worth of work.
That's a good day. That's a good
week. So anyway, so it was just that. And I think that kind of set me over an edge too, that this invisible mark that I just had been trying to attain. I finally felt like, okay, I have finally made it. I mean, there's lots more to come, and I've got a long way to go, but I kind of felt like, okay, this has all been worth it. Working at this,
you figured it out.
Yeah, it's like I finally, yeah, it just felt one of the most, seriously, aside from personal stuff, with relationships and kids and marriage and stuff, probably one of the most satisfying things I've ever done in my life
Yeah.
was
I
that
mean, you
moment.
ran the New York Marathon, and I can't imagine it was too different from completing that.
Kind of, yeah, similar feeling when you get from those kind of things. Yeah,
It's
yeah,
like you recognize how big this is, and even if nobody else understands, even like I call my parents and be like, "I had PC," they have no idea what the heck that means. But like, just
yeah,
for you, you're like,
yeah,
"I did this."
yeah.
I think it's also because you don't accidentally do that.
No,
You know what I'm
no.
saying? You don't accidentally hit 600 units. You can accidentally sell 400 units on a, like you just hit a couple
Mm,
of good ponies at the right place at the right time, but
right.
you don't accidentally hit 600 units in a week. You have
Yeah,
to do
no,
something you did was right, and
yeah,
you hit it. It's
yeah.
awesome.
And from that point forevermore, I just had a different sense of confidence about everything that I did. So yeah.
Yeah, it's awesome the way it works.
Mm.
Okay, favorite breakfast spot.
Um, I'll go back to my first summer with my dollar special. It was like,
Yeah, dude.
I mean, you just, I mean, come on, a dollar. But also my last summer too, we got together. We had a guys' headquarters and a girls' headquarters in South Bend, and so there was like 6 or 7 or 8 of us all the time, and we met at the same exact place every day for breakfast. And I always ate these peanut butter pancakes. So they had pancakes, and then they had, you could put peanut butter on them. So pancakes with peanut butter and syrup, and every day. That's what I ate that summer. But it
Love
was
that.
fun. It was fun because it was a big, instead of just like one headquarters, three guys, we got the guys headquarters, we got the girls headquarters. We all kind of had fun. It was very social. Um,
Execs are awesome that way.
yeah, yeah, we had fun and let loose a little bit. So both of those were on par
Love
with each other.
love that. And then the last one is your best follow day, whether you were following someone or they were following you, but the day where you're like, this is a fun follow day that I should.
Um, I gotta say, so Amita, my wife, our last summer, she followed me one day toward the end of the summer, and
Nice,
I,
dude.
and that's when things kind of clicked. And actually, that's when, actually, I think that I'll have to ask her. I think that's when we sold Oprah's Next Door Neighbor. Now, it might have happened the day before or something, but anyways, I circled her back to Oprah's house because I wanted to show her Oprah's house. But I also had a little unorthodox schedule that summer, and she's like, what do you do? Because she was like very disciplined and very, but I would start at 9 o'clock instead of 8 o'clock, and I would
Smart.
I would kick off it. So I kind of flipped it. I started at 9 o'clock, ended at 8 o'clock p.m. instead of starting at 8 p.m. and working till 9. Or I just shortened my day all summer.
Much
By the
better.
that whole summer, I had my own schedule. But anytime somebody followed me, I kind of had fun. I felt like I kind of put on I stepped it up a little bit, and it felt like I was putting on a performance. So, and you want to have a good day when someone's following you.
Yeah,
So
for their sake. Yeah.
almost always I would, because I would just step it up a notch. Your confidence goes up a notch, and you want to show people, and just little things that you say, and you're just on fire all day. Even
Yeah.
if everyone's not buying, you're just like, you're putting on a show all day.
And your
And
self-talk is better for some reason because it's almost like it's for both of you. Yeah.
totally. It
Yeah.
is, yeah, yeah.
I always preferred Bill Zizzy has said this on his advanced sales tip, but when he said that, I was like, I feel the same. Because I had
Mm,
more fun following, but I did better when I was by myself because I could focus.
mm,
But like sometimes you needed to like he's like I don't need to focus today. I need to have fun, and
yeah,
it was good to have someone follow you because like all right, we can just.
yeah,
And
yeah.
I like to talk to the person. Sometimes people are like, "Don't talk to me all day." You're like,
Yeah,
"What?" So it's like when you have someone, it's like, yeah, it was easier to deflect the rejection as well. Some old
yeah,
lady tell you blah blah. You're like, ah, she hadn't had a breakfast or whatever, and they're like, haha. It's just easier to.
yeah.
Yeah, I love that. All right, man. That concludes rapid fire questions. Thanks
Okay.
again to One Measure. Oh
Yeah,
man.
yeah.
Okay, so now it comes to time of the episode where this is always my favorite part is when we get to ask our guests their ponytail. Now, this could mean for people listening for the first time, this could be like a story about a customer that bought a lot of books or something crazy that happened. We've had people who got arrested. We've had people who shit themselves, like McCroskey. We've had people crazy stories on Bizzler. Sometimes it's just like Yvette gave us like Keister. She's like, hey, these are like the top 5 things I learned in sales and in leadership, and it
Mm,
was like this really cool like ponytail of more of like a inspiring. So whatever you want to make it, if it could be simple, it could be long, it's your call, my man. But this is usually the person's favorite story. So I'm excited for this. Take it away, Steve.
Yeah. This is one that, I mean, I got like everybody, I've got tons of stories and could tell you about the time your old territory, Hornell, New York, but I ended up in jail.
There was a
Back of a
jail
police
story in
car,
there?
ended up in jail. Okay, I'm still going to tell my ponytail story, but yeah, we're driving around outside of Bath. There's a little town somewhere near Bath, New York, and I'm in a house, and over the CB radio comes, "Be on the lookout for two young men selling books for the Southwestern Company," and the lady, and she ended up buying, but she looks at me and she's like, "Are they talking about you?" I said, "Yeah, I think so." But anyways, they had already
Don't know
got
why, but
we
yes, they
didn't
are.
we this was in the days where we didn't always get permits, and we didn't get a permit for this town because we were only going to be there for a few days or whatever. Anyways, they had picked up my roommate Tom. He's in the back of the police car, so for the next couple of hours I'm like trying to dodge the police cars and the police car with Tom in it, and a couple times I saw them go by and I'd like duck behind a tree or stay in a house a little bit longer, whatever. And
It's a man on the
finally
run, but on
Fin
schedule.
finally, they get me. They just for appearances and just to be tough guys, small town cops, they actually had us sit in the jail for about an hour, and then they're like, then they let us out and they drove us to the edge of town. They're like, "Don't come back." Anyways, that's not the story I wanted to
Love
tell.
it.
I don't want to end on that note, but I guess this story I want to tell, Andres, is really just the in this one summer. It's really the summer as a whole, my fourth summer, when things clicked, when I already talked
Mm,
about hitting PC for the first time, but this was in Vermont. It was an absolutely magical summer in every way. I hit the ground running. I knew what I was doing. My sales were just on all summer. I was the organizational leader. I think we had like the number 3 organization in the country that summer as far as student manager average and first year dealer average. So everybody was like just on fire. We were a tight knit group. Out of like 25 people, I think we only lost 2 people that summer. It was a small organization, but it was tight, and we were all on fire. But it was just a magical summer in that everything finally came together. But more than the units, more than the sales, more than the money which got spent and all this stuff, I get to Nashville and I'm sitting with JT Olson at the end of the summer. I even wrote about this in my book because it means so much to me. And JT knows the story. I've thanked him. But so we're sitting there by his pool in Brentwood, Tennessee, end of the summer. I checked out late because I didn't need to go back to school. I took a semester off to go to Europe, and we're sitting by the pool. It's just me and JT. I was hanging out at his house for the day. And he's like, talking about a couple guys in our organization. And he said, Steve, they think you hung the moon. And I was 22 years old and I had actually never heard that expression before. So I'm like, I didn't even know what that meant. I'm like, what do you mean, JT? They think you hung the moon. They think I hung the moon. He's like, they just think you had a world of impact on them this summer. And I'm like, I didn't realize that. These are 2 first year guys, not even mine, but somebody else's first year guys, but they were in the org. And he had heard everybody else from our org had already checked out. So I had checked out late, and he's like, I heard a lot of comments. And it was just, I was like, I didn't realize that I had that impact
mm.
on people. And so I'm getting emotional thinking about it. Sorry. But it was such a powerful thing, and it was emotional then, and it's emotional to me now, whatever, how many, 34 years later. But that made me realize that that this business, and they talk about this in Southwestern all the time, it's a business of people. And we're in the people business. Yeah, we were selling books and stuff like that, but it was about people, and it was about developing people. And I think Alan Clemens used to talk about this a lot when he was, still with the company, just about that we're in the business of developing people. And so from that point onward, I just realized, okay, I don't know what I'm going to do the rest of my life. I know I'm probably going to be involved in some kind of selling because I like it and I'm good at it and you can make good money at it. But more than that, I just really wanted to find some way to impact people and to have an influence on people. And to me, and from that point forward, I just really um, understood the value of really developing good relationships with people. And I'll circle it back here and just wrap up here that's more than anything that I got from Southwestern. Yes, I learned how to sell. Yes, I learned how to present myself, sell my ideas. I've made good money then. I've made good money since. Life's been good. Met my wife. We wouldn't have, I wouldn't have the life I have today. But it's just really, but developing relationships in general, and that's what matters. That's all there is, you know.
Yeah.
So,
Oh man, that's
anyways,
super
that's
cool.
so.
To hear about the impact that you've had on someone else from someone like JT is a super cool experience. Like I can't imagine what that must have been like. That's pretty sweet.
Yeah, thank you. And it's cool. And then and just and the camaraderie of all the people back then. And there's so many people I keep in touch with, especially now with Facebook, keeping in touch with people all over, but just staying connected with people. And there's friends from back then that sometimes we go, and I'm sure this happens to you too, but you go 5 or 10 years without seeing each other, talking, and you pick up right where you left off,
Yeah,
you know?
exactly. Yeah,
And you
and
always
have
you
to
always have
keep in
you always
touch.
have
You know.
yeah, and you always have that common bond. And so I guess that's the other thing I took from this too, besides the importance of having an impact and developing relationships, is just, some of my best friends in the world are people I sold books with, people I still keep in touch with today. And my life is richer and much better because I decided to, answer some weird classified ad back in. Can you imagine
A newspaper ad got you is the
a,
funniest thing, given what you do
cla-
now.
a classified ad? My goodness. Yeah.
That's what
Anyways.
a classified ad got the guy who ended up in coaching copywriting. That is
uh,
hilarious.
yeah.
You write an ad for that. There you go,
Yeah.
Southwestern. You're welcome.
Yeah.
We're
There you
writing
go.
ads for you right now. Man, Steve, thank you so much for being on here. This is a lot of fun.
Yeah, this has been great, Andres. I know the time flew by. I didn't really. We've been on for 2 hours, and
It
no,
goes
I
quick.
mean, and I appreciate you letting me just kind of roll with answers and stuff. And
Yeah.
I know we could probably, if we ever meet again somewhere, we could have a lot more conversations. So maybe in the next year's
Yeah.
Bizzler trip.
That's right. That's right. At Bizzler, and/or if we have a reunion in like Atlanta or in Savannah or something,
Yeah, yeah.
we do that. I love this. This is the first time I've done an episode in a while because we were traveling. So
Hmm.
this is like it's nice. This is a great one to come back and kind of re jump back into recording. So thank you so much for doing that and for joining me.
Yeah,
Guys, my name's Andre Scambo. This has been the Ponytails Podcast. If you sold books and you want to be on the show, make sure you get a hold of us, admin at theponytailspodcast.com. There's going to be a link below. There's also, Steve, make sure we have this. If Amy didn't get it, our producer, she didn't get this, make sure you send it to us before we post this episode. But I'd like a link to the copy of your book to where we
oh
can
yeah,
purchase.
yeah,
We
sure,
put it down below in the description notes. If
yep,
you are in copywriting, or maybe you want to get into copywriting, maybe you want to get a hold of Steve, we will also have a way to contact him. You can either just message us and we'll put you in touch with him if Steve would be open to that, or we can find a way
absolutely.
for you to connect with him down below. Check out the show notes below. And of course, make sure you guys follow us. We are starting a new Patreon campaign, so we would love any and all support. $5 gets you nothing other than knowing that you're helping us out and you're feeding my dogs. Then we're doing a $15 level, which gets you some stuff. We're trying to decide what that is and make it fun for everyone. Thank you so much. Be on the lookout for more content coming through from our Euro trip and our friends that we met, all the alumni that we met out there. That was a blast. And, you know, keep last thing is keep knocking. There's problem if you're listening to right now and you're on the book field, go to the next house. Damn it. On that note, we'll catch you guys later. Thanks so much. Bye everybody.
Thanks, Andres.